Most people in Harbor Springs, Maine, thought Marcus Rivera was just another weathered dock worker, spending his days hauling lobster traps and patching up fishing boats for crews who could barely afford his modest rates. What they didn't know was that beneath those salt-stained work clothes and calloused hands lived a marine engineering genius who once designed propulsion systems for America's Cup racing yachts. When billionaire tech mogul Catherine Blackwell stormed into Rivera's Marine Services that August morning and issued what seemed like an impossible ultimatum, fix her 200-foot superyacht that had stumped 40 of the world's top engineers in 6 months, or admit he was just another small-town pretender, Marcus should have turned her away. Instead, he accepted a challenge that would uncover buried talents, reveal long-hidden expertise, and prove to an entire coastal community that sometimes the most brilliant solutions come from the most unexpected places. This is the story of how a marine disaster became a technological triumph, and how one man's desperate gamble shocked the elite sailing world in ways nobody saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning fog rolled in from Penobscot Bay like a gray curtain, muffling the sounds of Harbor Springs as Marcus Rivera secured the last mooring line on the Stella Marie, a 40-year-old lobster boat that had seen better decades. The August air carried the familiar scent of salt spray and creosote that had been his constant companions for the past 8 years, ever since he'd returned to the small Maine fishing village where he'd grown up. His marine repair shop occupied a weathered pier at the end of Commercial Street, wedged between Murphy's Bait and Tackle and the Anchor Inn, its hand-painted sign barely visible through the accumulated grime of countless coastal storms. Marcus wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag, his dark eyes surveying the cluttered workspace that had become both his livelihood and his prison. The shop was cramped but efficient, filled with salvaged marine hardware, rebuilt engines, and the tools of a trade that kept Harbor Springs' fishing fleet afloat on determination and ingenuity rather than corporate budgets. At 42, his face carried the weathered lines of a man who'd spent years battling both the sea and disappointment, but his hands still moved with the precise confidence of someone who understood the intricate relationship between man and machine on the water. The bell above the shop door rattled as 16-year-old Sophie Martinez pushed inside, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her summer work clothes already showing signs of a morning spent helping her father prep his fishing gear. She'd been working part-time at the shop for 6 months, proving surprisingly adept at marine electronics and eager to learn everything Marcus was willing to teach about boat repair and ocean engineering. "Morning, Mr. Rivera," Sophie called out, grabbing her work apron from the hook by the door. "Dad says the engine on the Maria Elena is making that weird knocking sound again. Thinks it might be the same bearing problem we fixed last month." Marcus nodded, already mentally cataloging the likely causes and solutions. The Maria Elena was Miguel Martinez's fishing boat, a vessel that represented his family's entire livelihood and couldn't afford to be out of service during the peak lobster season. Like most of the boats that came through his shop, it required creative solutions and careful attention to make aging equipment perform reliably in one of the world's most demanding marine environments. "Tell your father to bring her in this afternoon," Marcus replied, consulting the appointment book that Sophie had organized with teenage efficiency. "We'll take a look at the bearing assembly and see if we can get a few more seasons out of the original components." The morning passed quickly with routine maintenance tasks that had become second nature over the years. Marcus rebuilt a fuel pump for the Hannah's Dream, diagnosed electrical problems on the Sea Witch, and helped Sophie understand the complex relationship between marine engines and the saltwater environment that constantly threatened to corrode every metal component. The work was satisfying in its way, problems with clear solutions, and customers who appreciated competent craftsmanship even when they couldn't afford to pay premium prices. Around 11 o'clock, the peaceful rhythm of their morning was shattered by the arrival of a sleek black helicopter that circled the harbor twice before settling onto the small landing pad behind the Harbor Springs Marina. The aircraft's appearance was so unusual in the working fishing village that several boats paused in their activities to watch as a woman in an expensive business suit emerged, followed by 2 men in dark clothing who looked more like security personnel than maritime enthusiasts. Marcus glanced up from the carburetor he was rebuilding, noting the helicopter's corporate markings, and wondering what kind of business would bring such obvious wealth to a place like Harbor Springs. The answer came 20 minutes later when the workshop door burst open without ceremony, revealing a woman who radiated the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money or consequences. Catherine Blackwell was everything Harbor Springs wasn't: polished, impatient, and accustomed to having every problem solved by writing larger checks. Her silver hair was perfectly styled despite the humid coastal air, and her Italian leather shoes had probably cost more than most fishing families earned in a month. She surveyed the cluttered shop with obvious distaste, her pale blue eyes taking in the oil-stained workbenches and improvised repair solutions with the expression of someone visiting a particularly unimpressive museum exhibit. "Are you the owner of this establishment?" Catherine asked, her voice carrying the clipped authority of someone who'd built a technology empire by demanding immediate results from everyone around her. "Marcus Rivera," he replied, setting down his tools and wiping his hands on his coveralls. "What can I do for you?" Catherine pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a photograph of what was clearly one of the most impressive yachts he'd ever seen. The vessel stretched over 200 feet, its sleek lines and sophisticated design suggesting engineering complexity that went far beyond typical recreational boats. Even in the photograph, Marcus could see evidence of advanced propulsion systems, computerized navigation equipment, and the kind of luxury appointments that represented unlimited budgets and uncompromising standards. "This is the Serafina, my yacht," Catherine said, her tone suggesting that the mere ownership of such a vessel should command immediate respect. "It's been experiencing catastrophic propulsion failures that have left it stranded in Portland Harbor for the past 6 months. My regular marine engineering team has been unable to identify the problem despite bringing in 40 of the most qualified naval architects and marine systems specialists money can hire." Marcus studied the photograph, his trained eye automatically analyzing the visible components and noting several design elements that suggested cutting-edge marine technology. The propulsion configuration appeared to be some kind of hybrid system, combining traditional shaft drives with what looked like advanced water jet technology. The complexity was impressive, but also suggested potential failure points that might not be obvious to engineers unfamiliar with the specific integration challenges of such sophisticated systems. "What kind of propulsion failures?" Marcus asked, his professional curiosity overriding his natural caution about dealing with demanding wealthy clients. "Complete power loss during operation," Catherine replied, though her attention had already wandered to the cluttered workshop and Sophie's obvious youth. "The engines run perfectly at dock. All systems test normal, but within minutes of leaving harbor, everything shuts down. We've replaced engines, rebuilt transmission systems, upgraded computer controls, and consulted with marine engineering firms from Newport to Monaco. Nothing works." The dismissive edge in Catherine's voice was unmistakable, the assumption that a small-town boat repair shop couldn't possibly understand technology sophisticated enough to challenge teams of expensive specialists. Marcus had heard that tone countless times over the years, the casual condescension of people who judged capability by appearance rather than knowledge or experience. "Sounds like a complex integration problem," Marcus said carefully. "Hybrid propulsion systems can have interaction issues that don't show up in individual component testing." Catherine's eyebrows rose with theatrical skepticism. "Really? And where exactly did you acquire expertise in advanced marine propulsion systems? From fixing lobster boats and patching up rusty fishing trawlers?" The question hit like a physical blow, carrying all the assumptions and prejudices that Marcus had been fighting since returning to Harbor Springs. He could have mentioned his 15 years designing racing yacht propulsion systems for America's Cup teams, his marine engineering degree from MIT, or the patents he still held on hybrid marine drive technologies that were used in luxury yachts around the world. Instead, he simply said, quote, "I've worked on some complex marine systems over the years." "I find that difficult to believe," Catherine said, her voice taking on the mocking edge of someone who enjoyed demonstrating intellectual superiority. "No offense, but this place looks like it specializes in patching holes and changing oil filters. A yacht like the Serafina requires a level of technical sophistication that goes far beyond basic marine repair." Sophie looked up from the electrical components she'd been organizing, her young face showing the kind of indignation that came from watching someone unfairly dismiss a person she respected. Marcus felt his own anger rising but forced himself to remain calm, recognizing the familiar pattern of assumptions that had shaped too many interactions since his return to Maine. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew where the conversation was heading. Catherine's smile was predatory, the expression of someone who'd identified weakness and intended to exploit it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I'm suggesting that you're exactly what you appear to be, a small-town mechanic who's out of his depth when dealing with real marine engineering challenges. But I'm willing to make you an interesting proposition. She walked over to the workshop windows, looking out at Harbor Springs' modest fishing fleet, with the detached interest of someone observing a quaint historical display. I'll give you 30 days to accomplish what 40 qualified engineers couldn't manage in 6 months. Fix the Serafina's propulsion problems and get her running reliably. If you succeed, I'll pay you $200,000 and publicly acknowledge that I was wrong about small-town capabilities. Marcus felt his breath catch. $200,000 would solve every financial problem he'd faced since returning to Maine, pay for Sophie's college education, and maybe even allow him to expand the shop's capabilities to serve the fishing community more effectively. But 30 days to solve a problem that had stumped teams of specialists seemed impossible, especially without access to the sophisticated diagnostic equipment that major marine engineering firms took for granted. "And if I can't fix it?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Then you publicly admit that you're a pretender who was foolish enough to think that basic boat repair skills could handle advanced marine engineering," Catherine replied, her tone making it clear that she expected exactly this outcome. "I'll make sure the maritime community knows that Harbor Springs' supposed marine expert couldn't solve a problem that required real technical expertise." Sophie stepped forward, her teenage outrage finally overcoming her natural deference to adults. "That's not fair. Mr. Rivera knows more about boats than anyone in Maine. Just because you have money doesn't mean you can." "Sophie," Marcus interrupted gently, though he appreciated her loyalty. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. The challenge hung between them like a gauntlet thrown down in medieval combat, designed to humiliate someone Catherine saw as presumptuous for thinking he could understand technology beyond his apparent station. Marcus knew he should walk away, should recognize the trap for what it was, a wealthy person's game designed to prove intellectual superiority over someone she considered beneath her social and economic class. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings about the impossibility of the task and the certainty of public humiliation if he failed. But the money was real, and so was the implication that he wasn't capable of something extraordinary. More importantly, the dismissive assumptions about his abilities stung with the accumulated weight of 8 years of being underestimated and overlooked. Marcus thought about the mortgage payments on his small house, the constant struggle to keep the shop profitable, and Sophie's dreams of studying marine engineering at a university she couldn't afford without significant financial help. He thought about the way people like Catherine Blackwell looked at places like Harbor Springs as charming backwaters populated by people who'd never amount to anything significant. "$200,000 if I fix your yacht in 30 days, Marcus heard himself say, the words emerging before his rational mind could prevent them. "Full diagnostic access, complete technical documentation, and no interference from your other consultants." Catherine's grin was triumphant, the expression of someone who'd successfully maneuvered opponent into an impossible position. "Excellent. I'll have the contracts drawn up this afternoon and delivered tomorrow. The terms will be exactly as we discussed. 30 days, complete propulsion system functionality, and you'll personally oversee every aspect of the repair process." She turned toward the door, pausing only to add, "Oh, and Rivera, I hope you have a good relationship with your local newspaper. This should make an interesting story about the dangers of overconfidence and small-town delusions of adequacy." The door chimed as Catherine left, and Marcus stood alone in his workshop with Sophie, the magnitude of what he'd just agreed to settling over him like fog rolling in from the bay. 30 days to accomplish something that had defeated 40 qualified marine engineers, with his reputation and financial future hanging in the balance. Sophie was staring at him with a mixture of admiration and concern, her young face reflecting the same confusion Marcus felt about whether he'd just made the best or worst decision of his life. "Mr. Rivera," she said quietly, "do you really think you can fix a yacht that stumped all those other engineers?" Marcus looked around his modest workshop, taking in the evidence of a life that had gradually adjusted to smaller expectations and safer challenges. The tools were good but not exceptional, the diagnostic equipment adequate for fishing boats but primitive compared to what major marine engineering firms used routinely. For the first time in years, he felt something stirring inside him that had nothing to do with resignation. and everything to do with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was still capable of something extraordinary. "I don't know," he admitted to Sophie, "but I'm going to find out." The contracts arrived the next morning via helicopter courier, delivered by a nervous-looking young man who clearly wished he was anywhere other than standing in a salt-stained marine repair shop. Marcus signed for the thick legal document, noting the expensive letterhead and the law firm address that suggested Catherine Blackwell wasn't taking any chances with enforceability or specific performance requirements. The contract was comprehensive and intimidating, filled with penalty clauses and technical specifications that made Marcus's stomach tighten as he read through them. Catherine had been thorough in defining success: complete propulsion system functionality, reliable operation under all normal conditions, and personal warranty that the repairs would remain effective for at least 6 months after completion. Failure would result in public acknowledgement of incompetence and legal responsibility for any costs associated with continued repair attempts. Tommy Chen arrived for work an hour later, his cheerful demeanor a sharp contrast to Marcus's brooding mood. At 28, Tommy had the kind of optimism that hadn't yet been worn down by repeated disappointments, combined with a genuine talent for marine electronics that he'd developed through 3 years of community college and countless hours of hands-on learning. He'd been working at the shop for 2 years, eager to expand his knowledge and surprisingly capable with complex diagnostic problems. "Morning, boss," Tommy called out, hanging his rain jacket on the hook by the door. "Sophie said something yesterday about helicopters and rich ladies. Everything okay?" Marcus folded the contract and shoved it into his desk drawer, still trying to process the full implications of what he'd committed to accomplish. "We need to talk about something that's either going to transform this business or destroy what's left of my professional reputation." Tommy's expression shifted from casual to concerned as Marcus explained the encounter with Catherine Blackwell, the impossible challenge, and the bet that now legally bound him to attempt something that 40 qualified engineers had been unable to accomplish. The young man listened without interruption, his eyes growing wider as the full scope of the task became clear. 30 days? Tommy finally said. "Boss, that's insane. I mean, I've seen you work miracles with engines that other mechanics gave up on, but a 200-foot yacht with propulsion problems that have stumped teams of specialists, that's not just difficult, it's practically impossible." "That's what I thought too," Marcus replied. "But the money, $200,000, would solve a lot of problems around here." Tommy nodded slowly, understanding the financial pressures that kept small marine repair shops operating on the edge of viability. "But what happens if you can't fix it? What's the penalty if this whole thing goes wrong?" Marcus pulled out the contract and pointed to a specific clause that made him wince every time he read it. "Public acknowledgement that I was wrong about my abilities, plus legal responsibility for any additional repair costs. Basically, Catherine gets to humiliate me professionally and potentially bankrupt the business." Tommy whistled low, a sound that perfectly captured the mixture of admiration and terror that Marcus felt about the entire situation. "She really wants to see you fail, doesn't she? The question is whether I'm going to give her that satisfaction," Marcus replied, "and whether I can ask you and Sophie to help me with something this risky. I can't pay extra wages. The business barely covers regular expenses. But if we're going to attempt this, I need people who understand marine systems and aren't afraid of hard work." Tommy was quiet for a long moment, staring at the contract and clearly wrestling with the implications of getting involved in such an ambitious and potentially disastrous project. "What kind of help are we talking about? Full diagnostic work, component rebuilding, systems integration?" "Everything," Marcus said. "If we're going to do this, we'll need to completely understand how every system on that yacht interacts with every other system. Hybrid propulsion, computer controls, navigation integration, power management. It's going to be like learning a completely new type of marine engineering from scratch." Before Tommy could respond, the shop door opened and Elena Vasquez entered, carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing the kind of warm smile that had made her the unofficial mother figure for half the fishing fleet in Harbor Springs. The owner of the Lighthouse Cafe 3 doors down, Elena had been bringing Marcus breakfast whenever she noticed he was too busy to eat, which had become increasingly frequent as the shop's reputation for quality work had spread throughout the coastal community. "Buenos dias, Marcus, Tommy," she said, setting the thermos on the workbench and pulling back the lid to reveal steaming coffee that smelled like heaven. "Sophie stopped by this morning, saying something about helicopters and important decisions." You boys look like you need caffeine and maybe some perspective. Elena had lived in Harbor Springs for 20 years, arriving from Puerto Rico with her late husband, and building the cafe into a community gathering place through sheer determination and the best seafood chowder on the Maine coast. At 55, she had silver streaking her dark hair and the kind of practical wisdom that came from raising 3 children while running a small business in a challenging economic environment. She noticed the contract on the workbench and the serious expressions on both men's faces. "Am I interrupting something important?" Tommy looked at Marcus, who shrugged. If they were really going to attempt this project, word would spread through Harbor Springs soon enough anyway. The fishing community was too small and too interconnected to keep secrets, especially ones involving mysterious wealthy outsiders and impossible technical challenges. "Marcus made a bet yesterday," Tommy explained. "Tell her about Catherine Blackwell." As Marcus recounted the story for the second time, Elena's expression shifted from curiosity to indignation to something that looked like fierce determination. She understood the financial pressures Marcus faced, had watched him struggle to balance technical expertise with business reality while maintaining his dignity, despite being consistently underestimated by people who judged capability by appearance rather than knowledge. "This woman, this Catherine Blackwell," Elena said when Marcus finished. "She thinks she's better than us because she has money. She thinks she can humiliate you because you work with your hands instead of sitting in some fancy office." "People like her see places like Harbor Springs as quaint curiosities," Marcus replied. "We're the supporting cast in their story, not people capable of real technical achievement." Elena was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her contacts with the purposeful efficiency of someone who'd spent decades networking within the coastal community. "My brother-in-law Diego works at the shipyard in Portland. He owes me a favor from when I catered his daughter's wedding. I bet he could help with access to technical documentation and maybe some specialized diagnostic equipment." "Elena, I can't ask people to—" "You're not asking," she interrupted, already dialing. "I'm offering. And I'm not the only one in this community who's tired of being looked down on by people with more money than sense." She found the contact she was looking for and started an animated conversation in rapid Spanish, her voice carrying the authority of someone calling in a legitimate favor. Tommy watched the exchange with growing excitement, beginning to understand that this project might involve more community support than anyone had initially anticipated. "Diego says the Serafina is at the main repair facility in Portland," Elena announced when she finished the call. "He knows the dock supervisor and can arrange access for legitimate marine repair consultants. Plus, he says the yacht's problems have become legendary among the shipyard workers. Nobody can figure out why such expensive systems keep failing." Tommy was already pulling out his laptop, his enthusiasm building as he began researching the technical specifications they'd need to understand. "Boss, Elena's right. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about proving that working-class expertise can solve problems that stump fancy consultants and expensive engineering firms." Marcus felt a mixture of gratitude and terror as he realized what was happening. The bet he'd made in a moment of wounded pride was becoming something larger, involving people who had their own reasons for wanting to see an underdog succeed against impossible odds. The pressure was mounting, but so was the support system that might actually make the project feasible. "All right," Marcus said, making a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. "Let's go see what we're really dealing with. But I want everyone to understand something. This isn't just difficult, it's dangerous. If we fail, it won't just be my reputation on the line." Elena finished organizing Diego's help and turned back to them with the satisfied expression of someone who just solved the first piece of a complex puzzle. "Diego will meet us at the shipyard tomorrow morning. He says the Serafina is impressive but clearly has some kind of fundamental design flaw that nobody's been able to identify." "What kind of design flaw?" Tommy asked, already taking notes in the detailed manner that had made him invaluable for complex diagnostic work. "Something about the interaction between the hybrid propulsion system and the yacht's navigation computers," Elena replied. "The engines work perfectly when tested individually, but something goes wrong when all systems operate together under load." Marcus studied the contract one more time, then looked at Tommy's eager face and Elena's determined expression. 3 people against impossible odds, with 30 days to prove that practical knowledge and creative problem-solving could triumph over conventional wisdom and unlimited budgets. "Tomorrow we find out exactly what 40 marine engineers couldn't figure out," Marcus said, folding the contract and putting it away. "And we better hope we're smarter than we think we are." The drive to Portland took 2 hours through the kind of Maine coastal scenery that made tourists fall in love with New England. Rocky coastlines, pine forests, and small harbors where working boats mixed with pleasure craft in picturesque harmony. Marcus drove his aging pickup truck while Tommy and Sophie followed in the shop's service van, all three of them nervous about what they might discover at one of the East Coast's most sophisticated marine repair facilities. The Portland shipyard occupied several hundred acres of waterfront property, a sprawling complex of dry docks, maintenance facilities, and specialized workshops that serviced everything from commercial fishing vessels to luxury yachts belonging to international celebrities. Diego Vasquez met them at the main gate, his weathered face reflecting 20 years of experience with marine systems that ranged from simple to impossibly complex. "Elena's friends," Diego said in greeting, leading them through the security checkpoint with the casual authority of someone who'd earned respect through decades of competent work. "She told me about your situation with the rich lady and the impossible boat. Follow me. The Serafina is something you have to see to believe." They walked through the shipyard's organized chaos, past vessels in various stages of repair and construction, until they reached a section reserved for the most exclusive and expensive projects. The Serafina sat in a private dock, surrounded by equipment and diagnostic tools that represented the cutting edge of marine engineering technology. Marcus felt his confidence waver as he got his first direct look at Catherine Blackwell's yacht. The vessel was even more impressive in person than in photographs. Over 200 feet of sleek engineering sophistication that combined traditional luxury yacht aesthetics with clearly advanced propulsion and navigation systems. Even at rest, the boat radiated the kind of technical complexity that suggested problems requiring genuinely specialized knowledge to solve. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Diego commented, noting Marcus's expression. "But she's been sitting here for 6 months while teams of expensive consultants scratch their heads and bill ridiculous hourly rates for making no progress." Sophie was taking photographs with her phone, documenting every visible system component with the thoroughness of someone who understood that complex problems required detailed analysis. "Mr. Rivera, look at those propulsion pods. I've never seen anything like that configuration." Marcus examined the yacht's stern, where twin propulsion units combined traditional propeller shafts with what appeared to be advanced water jet systems integrated into a single hybrid assembly. The engineering was impressive, but also suggested potential interaction problems that might not be obvious to specialists focused on individual system performance rather than overall integration. "What kind of failures have you observed?" Marcus asked Diego, falling back on his engineering background to approach the problem systematically. "Complete power loss during operation," Diego replied, consulting a clipboard filled with maintenance records and diagnostic reports. "Engines run perfectly at dock. All computer systems test normal. Navigation equipment functions properly, but within 10 minutes of leaving harbor under any significant load, everything shuts down simultaneously." Tommy had found his way to the yacht's control systems, examining the array of screens and interfaces that managed everything from propulsion to navigation to environmental controls. "Boss, this is like the bridge of a small warship. The integration complexity is incredible." "That's part of the problem," Diego continued. "Most marine engineers specialize in specific systems: engines, electronics, hydraulics, navigation. But this yacht requires understanding how all those systems work together and how they can interfere with each other under operational conditions." Marcus climbed aboard the Serafina, immediately noting the quality of construction and the attention to detail that characterized truly professional marine engineering. Everything was perfectly finished, precisely installed, and obviously expensive. But perfection in individual components didn't guarantee successful system integration, especially when dealing with the complex interactions between mechanical, electrical, and computer-controlled systems. "Has anyone mapped the complete electrical architecture?" Marcus asked, studying the cable runs and junction boxes that suggested a sophisticated but potentially problematic wiring layout. "Several teams have tried," Diego replied, "but the documentation is incomplete, and some of the integration work was done by different contractors who didn't always coordinate their efforts effectively." Elena had been quietly observing the technical discussion, but now she stepped forward with the practical question that often got overlooked in complex engineering analysis. "What do the boat's operators say about the failure pattern?" "People who actually use the systems sometimes notice things that engineers miss." Diego's expression brightened, recognizing the wisdom of Elena's approach. The captain mentioned that problems always start with navigation system alerts, then spread to propulsion controls within seconds. But the diagnostic equipment shows all systems functioning normally right up until the moment everything shuts down. Marcus felt the familiar excitement of a challenging technical puzzle, the kind of complex problem that had originally drawn him to marine engineering before life circumstances had forced him into simpler repair work. The Serafina represented the type of advanced system integration he'd once specialized in, before family obligations and financial pressures had limited his career to more predictable challenges. "We'll need complete system documentation," Marcus said, his engineer's mind already organizing the diagnostic approach they'd need to follow. Electrical schematics, propulsion specifications, computer network architecture, navigation system integration protocols. Everything. "Most of that exists," Diego replied, "though it's scattered across different contractors and consultants. But I can help you gather the technical documentation, and the shipyard has diagnostic equipment that might be useful for system-level analysis." Tommy was examining the yacht's main electrical panels, taking photographs and making notes about the complexity of the power distribution system. "Boss, this is going to require understanding not just marine engineering, but network protocols, computer integration, and probably some electrical engineering concepts we haven't used in years." "Then we better start learning," Marcus replied, feeling the familiar combination of excitement and terror that accompanied any ambitious technical challenge. 30 days to understand systems that took teams of specialists months to fail to figure out. Sophie had wandered forward to examine the navigation equipment, her teenage curiosity undaunted by the complexity of the sophisticated electronics. "Mr. Rivera, these GPS and radar systems are integrated with the propulsion controls through some kind of computer network. What if the failures aren't mechanical problems, but software conflicts?" Marcus looked at his young assistant with growing respect. Sophie's suggestion reflected exactly the kind of systems thinking that distinguished good marine engineers from technicians who only understood individual components. "That's an excellent observation. Integration problems often show up as failures in one system that are actually caused by conflicts with completely different systems." Diego nodded agreement. Several consultants have mentioned software issues, but most marine engineers don't have the computer expertise to diagnose network problems. And most computer specialists don't understand marine systems well enough to identify the mechanical interactions. Elena was taking notes in the practical manner of someone who'd spent years managing complex projects with limited resources. "So you need someone who understands both marine engineering and computer systems, plus the ability to see how everything works together instead of just focusing on individual parts." "Exactly," Marcus replied, beginning to understand why 40 specialists had failed to solve the Serafina's problems. Most consulting teams bring experts in specific areas, but this kind of integration challenge requires understanding the relationships between different technical disciplines. As they finished their initial survey of the yacht, Marcus felt the scope of the challenge crystallizing in his mind. The Serafina wasn't just a boat with mechanical problems. It was a complex technological system with interaction issues that required a fundamentally different diagnostic approach than most marine engineers were trained to handle. "We'll need to set up a diagnostic protocol that examines system interactions rather than individual component performance," Marcus announced as they prepared to leave the shipyard. "And we'll need to do it with equipment and expertise that can't match what major consulting firms have available." Tommy was reviewing his photographs and notes, his enthusiasm building despite the obvious challenges ahead. "But boss, we have something those expensive consultants don't have. We're not locked into conventional approaches. If traditional marine engineering methods haven't worked, maybe we need to try something completely different." Diego walked them back to the gate, promising to coordinate access to technical documentation and diagnostic equipment over the coming weeks. "Marcus, I want you to know that Elena's not the only one rooting for you. Word about this challenge has spread through the shipyard, and most of the workers are hoping to see someone prove that practical knowledge can beat expensive credentials." As they drove back toward Harbor Springs, Marcus reflected on the day's discoveries. The Serafina was even more complex than he'd anticipated, but the problem was beginning to take shape in ways that suggested possible solutions. Integration failures were often caused by overlooked interactions between systems, the kind of subtle problems that required creative thinking, rather than simply more sophisticated equipment. "What do you really think?" Sophie asked as they reached the outskirts of Harbor Springs. Can we actually figure out something that's stumped 40 other engineers? Marcus considered the question carefully, weighing his returning confidence in his technical abilities against the reality of the challenge they faced. I think we have a chance, but only if we approach this completely differently than everyone else has tried. Traditional marine engineering diagnostics aren't working, so we need to become system integration specialists in 30 days. Tommy was already making lists of the technical knowledge they'd need to acquire, and the diagnostic approaches they'd need to develop. It's going to mean long days and late nights, learning things we've never studied before. But if we can pull this off, it changes everything about how people see this shop and what we're capable of accomplishing. As they pulled into the Rivera Marine Services parking area, Marcus felt the familiar mixture of excitement and terror that accompanied any decision to attempt something extraordinary. Tomorrow would begin the most challenging 30 days of his professional life, with his reputation and financial future depending on his ability to solve a problem that had defeated teams of qualified specialists. But for the first time in years, Marcus Rivera felt like he was exactly where he belonged, facing an impossible technical challenge that would require every bit of knowledge and creativity he possessed. Win or lose the next month would prove whether 8 years of small-town boat repair had diminished his capabilities or simply been preparing him for the most important engineering challenge of his career. The technical documentation for the Serafina arrived in Harbor Springs 3 days later, delivered by a courier service that looked distinctly uncomfortable navigating the narrow streets of the fishing village. Marcus signed for 6 boxes of engineering specifications, system manuals, and diagnostic reports that represented 6 months of failed attempts by some of the most qualified marine engineers on the East Coast. The sheer volume of paperwork suggested the complexity of what they were attempting, but also hinted at the possibility that previous consultants had been overwhelmed by information rather than limited by its absence. Marcus spread the documents across every available surface in the workshop, creating a paper landscape of electrical schematics, propulsion specifications, and computer network diagrams that transformed the modest repair shop into something resembling a marine engineering research facility. Tommy and Sophie worked methodically through the technical manuals, organizing information by system type and creating cross-reference charts that would help them understand how different components interacted during normal operation. "This is incredible," Tommy said, examining a detailed schematic of the yacht's hybrid propulsion system. "Look at this integration between the diesel engines, electric motors, and water jet assemblies. It's like they combined 3 different propulsion technologies into a single system without fully understanding how they'd interact under operational loads." Sophie had claimed the computer network documentation, her teenage facility with technology proving invaluable for understanding the complex relationships between navigation systems, propulsion controls, and environmental management computers. "Mr. Rivera, I think I found something important. The navigation computers are connected to the propulsion system through a data network that also handles radar, GPS, weather monitoring, and communication systems. What if one system is sending conflicting signals to another?" Marcus examined the network diagrams Sophie had highlighted, his engineering mind immediately recognizing the potential for system conflicts that might not be obvious during individual component testing. That's exactly the kind of integration problem that could cause cascading failures. Traditional marine diagnostics test each system separately, but operational failures often result from interactions between systems that work perfectly in isolation. Elena arrived with lunch for everyone, her usual offering of fresh seafood sandwiches and coffee that had become essential fuel for the intensive technical research consuming their days. She surveyed the paper-covered workshop with the practical eye of someone who'd managed complex projects with limited resources, noting the organized chaos that characterized serious problem-solving efforts. "How's the detective work progressing?" Elena asked, setting down plates and clearing a small space on the workbench. "You boys look like you're trying to solve the mysteries of the universe." "Close," Marcus replied, accepting the sandwich gratefully. "We're trying to understand how a 200-foot yacht can have perfect individual systems that completely fail when they work together. It's like diagnosing a patient where every organ is healthy but the body keeps dying." Tommy had been quietly studying the diagnostic reports from previous consulting teams, looking for patterns in their approaches and potential blind spots in their analysis. "Boss, I think I see part of the problem." Every consulting team focused on their area of expertise. The engine specialists looked at propulsion. The electronics experts examined computer systems. The navigation consultants analyzed GPS and radar equipment, but nobody seems to have mapped the complete system interaction under operational loads. "What do you mean by operational loads?" Sophie asked, her practical curiosity cutting through the technical jargon to focus on the essential question. "When the yacht is actually moving through water under power," Marcus explained, "all systems experience stresses and interactions that don't exist during dock testing. Vibration affects electronic connections, electrical loads change as different systems activate, and computer networks can experience timing conflicts when processing real-time data from multiple sources simultaneously." Elena nodded understanding, her restaurant management experience providing unexpected insight into complex system interactions. Like when the dinner rush hits, and suddenly every piece of kitchen equipment is running at maximum capacity. Things that work perfectly during slow periods can fail completely when everything operates together under stress. "Exactly," Marcus agreed, beginning to see how their approach might differ from previous consulting efforts. "We need to understand the Serafina as a complete integrated system rather than a collection of sophisticated individual components." The afternoon was spent creating what Tommy dubbed failure scenario maps, detailed flowcharts showing how problems in one system could cascade through the yacht's integrated networks to cause apparently unrelated failures in completely different areas. The work was methodical and demanding, requiring them to think like both marine engineers and systems analysts while maintaining focus on practical solutions rather than theoretical possibilities. "Here's something interesting," Sophie announced, looking up from a stack of diagnostic reports. 3 different consulting teams mentioned intermittent communication errors in the navigation network, but they all dismissed it as minor because the errors didn't seem to affect individual system performance. What if those communication errors are actually the trigger for everything else? Marcus examined the reports Sophie had identified, noting a pattern that previous consultants had apparently overlooked. Communication timing errors in a network that controls both navigation and propulsion systems could definitely cause the kind of cascading failures we're seeing. The navigation computer sends conflicting data to the propulsion controls, which triggers safety shutdowns to prevent equipment damage. Tommy was already pulling up network protocol specifications on his laptop, his enthusiasm building as he recognized the potential breakthrough they might have identified. If that's the root cause, then the solution isn't rebuilding mechanical components or upgrading individual systems. It's fixing the communication protocols between systems that were never designed to work together in this specific configuration. "But how do we test that theory?" Elena asked, her practical business sense focusing on the essential question of verification before committing resources to a specific solution approach. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the diagnostic challenges they faced with limited equipment and access to the yacht itself. "We need to simulate the complete system interaction under operational conditions, but we can't exactly take a 200-foot yacht out for test runs while we're experimenting with potential solutions. What about system modeling?" Sophie suggested, her teenage familiarity with computer simulation, offering a perspective that hadn't occurred to the adults. "If we can create a computer model of all the interacting systems, we might be able to identify exactly where the communication conflicts occur and test potential fixes before trying them on the actual yacht." Tommy looked at Sophie with growing respect, recognizing the sophisticated thinking behind her seemingly simple suggestion. "That's brilliant, but it would require software and computing power that we don't have access to. Marine system modeling usually requires specialized engineering workstations that cost more than most fishing boats." Elena was already reaching for her phone, her expression suggesting that she might have a solution to what appeared to be an insurmountable resource problem. "My nephew Carlos works at the University of Maine's Ocean Engineering program. They have computer modeling capabilities for marine research projects. Let me see if academic curiosity and family connections can get us access to the tools we need." The conversation that followed was conducted in rapid Spanish, with Elena explaining their situation to someone who apparently found the technical challenge intriguing enough to consider bending normal academic protocols. Marcus listened to the animated discussion with growing hope, recognizing that their unconventional approach might actually benefit from resources that wouldn't normally be available to commercial marine repair operations. "Carlos says the university has marine engineering simulation software that could model the Serafina's system interactions," Elena announced when she finished the call. He's willing to help if we can provide detailed technical specifications and convince his department head that this represents legitimate research rather than commercial consulting work. Marcus felt pieces falling into place with almost supernatural precision, the right technical insight, access to necessary computing resources, and academic expertise that could bridge the gap between their practical knowledge and the sophisticated analysis tools required for complex system modeling. What would we need to provide to make this work? Complete system specifications, which we have thanks to those 6 boxes of documentation, Elena replied, plus a research proposal that frames this as an investigation into marine system integration challenges, rather than simply fixing one wealthy woman's yacht. Tommy was already organizing the technical documentation they'd need to share, his excitement building as he recognized the potential of combining their practical diagnostic insights with university-level analytical capabilities. This could actually work. We understand the problem. From a practical marine engineering perspective, the university has the computational tools to model complex system interactions, and together we might be able to solve something that stumped individual consulting teams. Sophie had been quietly reviewing the network communication specifications, her young mind making connections that hadn't occurred to the adults focused on larger system architecture issues. Mr. Rivera, I think there's something else we should consider. These communication errors only happen under operational loads, right? What if the problem isn't the network protocols themselves, but the physical installation of the network cables? Marcus looked at Sophie with surprise, recognizing that her observation might represent another critical insight. What do you mean by physical installation problems? Well, if vibration or electrical interference from the propulsion systems is affecting the network cables, that could cause intermittent communication errors that only show up when the yacht is actually moving and all systems are operating under load. The diagnostic equipment tests network functionality at dock, where there's no vibration or electrical interference from operational systems. Tommy stood up abruptly, his expression showing the kind of excitement that came from recognizing a potentially game-changing insight. Sophie's right. We've been thinking about this as a software or system integration problem, but it might actually be a basic installation issue that's been disguised by the complexity of the overall system. Marcus felt his engineering instincts crystallizing around what might be the key insight they'd been looking for. Marine electrical systems were notoriously vulnerable to vibration, moisture, and electromagnetic interference. But modern yachts had become so dependent on computer networks that installation problems could cause exactly the kind of cascading system failures they were investigating. That would explain why all the individual components test perfectly, Marcus said, his excitement building as the implications became clear. The network hardware works fine under laboratory conditions, but fails when exposed to the harsh electrical and mechanical environment of an operational yacht. Elena was taking notes with the focused attention of someone who recognized that they might be approaching a breakthrough. So instead of rebuilding engines or upgrading computer systems, you might need to relocate network cables and improve electrical shielding? Potentially, Marcus replied, though his engineering caution prevented him from committing to any specific solution before they'd completed proper analysis. But first we need to prove the theory through system modeling, and then verify it with diagnostic testing on the actual yacht. The remainder of the afternoon was spent preparing the research proposal that would justify university cooperation with their investigation. The work required translating their practical diagnostic insights into academic language that would appeal to researchers interested in marine system integration challenges, while maintaining focus on the specific technical problems they needed to solve. This is good, Tommy said, reviewing their draft proposal. We're framing this as research into communication network reliability in marine environments, with the Serafina serving as a case study in complex system integration challenges. Academic enough to justify university resources, but practical enough to solve our actual problem. Sophie had been creating detailed diagrams showing their theory about network cable installation problems, her teenage artistic abilities proving valuable for technical illustration. If we're right about this, it means the solution might be relatively simple compared to what everyone else has been trying. Instead of redesigning systems, we just need to relocate and properly shield the network infrastructure. Marcus looked around the workshop that had been transformed into a marine engineering research facility, filled with technical documentation, system diagrams, and the kind of analytical work that he hadn't done since his days designing racing yacht propulsion systems. For the first time since accepting Catherine Blackwell's challenge, he felt genuinely optimistic about their chances of success. Tomorrow we take our theory to the university and see if computer modeling supports our diagnostic conclusions, Marcus announced, as they prepared to close for the day. If we're right about network installation problems, we might actually be able to solve this in the remaining 3 weeks. Elena was organizing the papers and technical manuals that represented their intensive research effort, her expression reflecting the satisfaction of someone who'd helped coordinate a complex project through its critical early phases. And if you're wrong? Marcus considered the question seriously, weighing his growing confidence against the reality that they were still attempting something that had defeated 40 qualified marine engineers. Then we keep investigating until we find the right answer, or we run out of time and learn some hard lessons about the difference between confidence and competence. Tommy was already making lists of the additional technical information they'd need to gather and the diagnostic tests they'd need to perform to verify their theory. Either way, we're closer to understanding this problem than we were a week ago. That has to count for something. As they locked up the workshop and prepared to head home, Marcus reflected on how the challenge that had begun as a wealthy woman's attempt to humiliate a small-town mechanic had evolved into a genuine technical adventure that was pushing all of them to rediscover capabilities they'd forgotten they possessed. Win or lose, the experience was transforming their understanding of what they were capable of accomplishing when they refused to accept conventional limitations. But tomorrow would begin the real test of whether their theoretical insights could translate into practical solutions that would actually fix the most sophisticated yacht any of them had ever encountered. The University of Maine's Advanced Ocean Engineering Laboratory occupied a modern building overlooking Penobscot Bay, its glass facade reflecting the morning sunlight, as Marcus, Tommy, and Sophie approached the main entrance. Carlos Vasquez met them in the lobby, his resemblance to Elena evident in his warm smile and practical demeanor, though his engineering PhD and professorial position represented a different path through the same working-class family background. Elena's marine engineering friends, Carlos said in greeting, leading them through security and into the heart of one of the East Coast's most sophisticated marine research facilities. She told me about your situation with the impossible yacht and the rich lady who thinks money can solve any technical problem. This should be interesting. The Ocean Engineering Lab was a revelation, filled with computer workstations, wave tanks, and modeling equipment that represented the cutting edge of marine research technology. Graduate students worked at terminals running complex simulations, their screens displaying three-dimensional models of ships, offshore platforms, and underwater vehicles that pushed the boundaries of current engineering knowledge. "This is incredible," Sophie said, her teenage enthusiasm undaunted by the obvious sophistication of the research environment. "You can actually model how boats behave in different sea conditions?" "Among other things," Carlos replied, noting her genuine interest with the approval of someone who appreciated curiosity regardless of its source. "We model everything from small boat stability to offshore platform dynamics to the hydrodynamic efficiency of commercial ship hull designs. Marine system integration analysis is definitely within our capabilities." He led them to a workstation equipped with multiple monitors and processing power that dwarfed anything available in commercial marine repair facilities. The software interface looked complex but well organized, with modules for mechanical systems, electrical networks, fluid dynamics, and system integration analysis that could simulate the interaction between all major yacht components under various operational conditions. "Show me what you figured out about the Serafina's problems," Carlos said, settling into the operator's chair with the confident ease of someone who'd spent years working with sophisticated analytical tools. For the next 2 hours, Marcus, Tommy, and Sophie presented their diagnostic conclusions while Carlos translated their practical insights into the mathematical parameters required for computer modeling. The process was educational for everyone involved, requiring the Harbor Springs team to articulate their theoretical understanding in precise technical terms while learning to think about marine systems in ways that could be mathematically simulated. "Your theory about network communication failures triggered by physical installation problems is definitely testable," Carlos said as he input the final system parameters. "If you're right, the simulation should show communication timing errors that correlate with vibration patterns and electrical interference from the propulsion systems." The computer model took nearly an hour to process, during which time Carlos gave them a tour of the laboratory's other research projects. They observed graduate students testing small-scale wave energy devices, examining underwater vehicle prototypes, and analyzing data from ocean monitoring systems that collected information from sensors deployed throughout the Gulf of Maine. "Marine engineering has become incredibly interdisciplinary," Carlos explained as they watched a student calibrating instruments for an autonomous underwater vehicle. Modern systems require understanding not just mechanical and electrical engineering, but computer science, materials science, and systems integration theory. The days when you could specialize in just engines or just electronics are largely over. Marcus nodded understanding, recognizing that his own career path had followed exactly that evolution, from specialized propulsion design to broader system integration challenges. That's part of what makes the Serafina's problems so difficult to diagnose. The failure modes cross multiple technical disciplines in ways that traditional marine engineering doesn't normally address. When they returned to the workstation, the simulation was complete, and Carlos was reviewing results that made him frown with concentration. This is interesting. Your theory appears to be correct, but incomplete. The model shows communication timing errors associated with network cable installation problems, but there's also evidence of more fundamental system architecture issues. Tommy leaned over Carlos's shoulder to examine the simulation results, his expression reflecting both satisfaction at having their diagnostic theory confirmed and concern about the additional complexity that was becoming apparent. What kind of system architecture issues? The hybrid propulsion system appears to have been designed by integrating components from different manufacturers without full consideration of how their control systems would interact, Carlos explained, highlighting specific areas of the simulation where timing conflicts were creating cascading failures. Your network installation problems are real, but they're triggering failures in system integration that has more fundamental flaws. Sophie was studying the graphical representation of system interactions, her young mind making connections that reflected her growing understanding of complex technical relationships. So fixing the network problems might reduce the frequency of failures, but it won't eliminate them completely unless we also address the underlying integration issues. Exactly, Carlos confirmed. This is actually a more sophisticated problem than previous consulting teams recognized. They were looking for single-point failures in individual systems, but this yacht has multiple interacting problems that require a comprehensive systems engineering approach to solve. Marcus felt his initial optimism being tempered by the recognition that their challenge was even more complex than they'd realized. Fixing network installation problems was within their capabilities, but redesigning system architecture integration might require expertise and resources beyond what their small team could manage in the remaining time. How difficult would it be to address the system architecture issues? Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer wouldn't be encouraging. Carlos was quiet for a moment, reviewing the simulation results and considering the practical implications of what the modeling had revealed. Theoretically, it's solvable. The integration problems result from timing conflicts between control systems that were designed to operate independently, but implementing solutions would require reprogramming multiple computer systems and possibly replacing some hardware components with versions that have compatible communication protocols. Tommy was taking detailed notes, his mechanical aptitude helping him understand the practical challenges of implementing the solutions that computer modeling had identified. That sounds like it would require access to proprietary software and specialized programming knowledge that most marine repair facilities don't have. Under normal circumstances, yes, Carlos replied. But this might be where academic resources can bridge the gap between theoretical solutions and practical implementation. We have graduate students who specialize in marine control systems, and we maintain relationships with equipment manufacturers who might be willing to provide technical support for legitimate research projects. Elena would have been proud of her nephew's problem-solving approach, Marcus thought, recognizing the same practical creativity that had helped coordinate their access to university resources in the first place. What would that kind of collaboration involve? A formal research partnership between the university and your marine repair operation, Carlos explained. We provide analytical expertise and access to specialized resources. You provide real-world system access and practical implementation knowledge. The Serafina becomes a test case for advanced marine system integration research, with benefits for both academic understanding and commercial application. Sophie was already anticipating the practical implications of such an arrangement, her teenage directness cutting through academic complexity to focus on essential questions. Would that kind of partnership be ready in time to meet the 30-day deadline? Or would it take months to organize through university bureaucracy? Carlos grinned at her practical focus, recognizing the kind of thinking that separated successful engineers from those who got lost in theoretical possibilities. That depends on how we present the opportunity to the department head. If this represents a chance to demonstrate practical applications of marine systems research, we might be able to expedite normal approval processes. The conversation that followed, involved increasingly complex discussions of university research protocols, graduate student thesis projects, and the potential for turning the Serafina Challenge into a legitimate academic investigation that could benefit both immediate problem-solving needs and longer-term research objectives. Dr. Peterson is going to want to see detailed technical documentation and a clear research plan, Carlos said as they prepared to leave the laboratory. But if you can demonstrate that this represents genuine advancement in marine systems integration knowledge, she's usually supportive of projects that bridge academic research with real-world applications. Marcus felt cautious optimism returning, as he recognized that their unconventional approach might actually provide access to resources and expertise that traditional consulting firms couldn't match. University research partnerships operated under different constraints than commercial marine engineering, potentially allowing for creative solutions that wouldn't be feasible within normal business relationships. How quickly could we organize a meeting with Dr. Peterson? Tommy asked, his enthusiasm building, as he recognized the potential for solving problems that had seemed insurmountable when they were limited to small-town marine repair shop resources. This afternoon, if you can provide the technical documentation she'll need to evaluate the research potential, Carlos replied. Academic curiosity moves faster than administrative bureaucracy when professors recognize opportunities for significant research contributions. As they drove back toward Harbor Springs, Marcus reflected on how their approach to the Serafina Challenge was evolving in ways that none of them had anticipated. What had begun as a desperate attempt to solve an impossible technical problem was becoming a legitimate research investigation that might actually contribute to broader understanding of marine systems integration challenges. "Do you think we can actually pull this off?" Sophie asked as they reached the outskirts of Harbor Springs. "I mean, solving something that 40 other engineers couldn't figure out, with help from university researchers who've never worked on this specific problem before." Marcus considered the question carefully, weighing his growing understanding of the technical challenges against the reality of their expanded resources and collaborative approach. "I think we have a better chance now than we did a week ago. We understand the problem better, we have access to analytical tools that previous consultants didn't use, and we're approaching this as a systems integration challenge rather than a collection of individual component problems." Tommy was already making lists of the additional work they'd need to complete before meeting with Dr. Peterson, his mechanical aptitude helping him organize the practical steps required to transform their diagnostic insights into a formal research proposal. Plus, we're not locked into conventional marine engineering approaches. If traditional methods haven't worked, maybe unconventional collaboration is exactly what this problem requires. As they pulled into the Rivera Marine Services parking area, Marcus felt the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that accompanied any decision to push beyond established limitations. The next few days would determine whether their academic partnership could provide the resources needed to solve the Serafina's problems, or whether they'd simply identified more sophisticated ways to fail at an impossible challenge. But for the first time since accepting Catherine Blackwell's bet, Marcus felt like they were approaching the problem with tools and expertise that might actually be adequate for the challenge they'd undertaken. Win or lose, they were no longer simply guessing about solutions. They were systematically analyzing a complex technical problem with the kind of rigorous approach that separated real engineering from educated guesswork. The meeting with Dr. Peterson took place that same afternoon in the university's Marine Engineering Conference Room, a space that reflected decades of successful research partnerships between academic institutions and marine industry leaders. Marcus, Tommy, and Sophie sat across from the department head while Carlos provided technical background, and Elena offered the practical perspective that had become essential to their collaborative approach. Dr. Sarah Peterson was everything Marcus had expected from a leading marine engineering researcher, technically sophisticated, academically rigorous, and blessed with the kind of practical insight that separated successful professors from those who never ventured beyond theoretical analysis. She reviewed their diagnostic conclusions and computer modeling results with the focused attention of someone who recognized both the technical significance and research potential of what they were proposing. "This is fascinating," Dr. Peterson said after studying their analysis for nearly an hour. "You've identified a systems integration problem that previous consulting teams missed because they were applying traditional diagnostic approaches to a non-traditional technical challenge. The research implications could be significant." Tommy leaned forward, his enthusiasm evident as he recognized that their approach was being taken seriously by someone with the authority to provide resources they desperately needed. "Does that mean the university would be willing to support a research partnership?" "It means I'm very interested in exploring that possibility," Dr. Peterson replied carefully. "But I need to understand the practical implications of what you're proposing. This isn't just academic research. You're attempting to solve a real technical problem under significant time pressure, with financial and professional consequences if you fail. Marcus appreciated her directness, recognizing the kind of practical thinking that had made her successful in bridging academic research with commercial applications. We understand the risks, but we also understand that conventional approaches have already failed. If we're going to solve this problem, it's going to require resources and expertise that go beyond what a small marine repair shop normally has access to. Elena had been quietly observing the academic discussion, but now she spoke up with the practical perspective that often cut through complex technical analysis to focus on essential questions. Dr. Peterson, what would the university need from us to make this partnership work? And what could you provide that would actually help solve the Serafina's problems? Good questions, Dr. Peterson replied, her respect for Elena's directness evident in her tone. From you, we'd need complete technical access to the yacht, detailed documentation of all diagnostic work, and commitment to sharing results that could benefit broader marine engineering research. From us, you'd get access to analytical tools, graduate student expertise, and industry connections that might be essential for implementing solutions. Sophie had been taking notes throughout the meeting, her teenage organizational skills proving valuable for tracking the complex arrangements being discussed. What about the 30-day deadline? Would university research protocols allow for the kind of rapid problem-solving we need? Dr. Peterson smiled at Sophie's practical focus, recognizing the kind of thinking that would serve her well if she chose to pursue marine engineering education. Academic research usually operates on longer timelines, but this situation is unusual enough to justify expedited procedures. If we can demonstrate that this represents legitimate research with immediate practical applications, we might be able to mobilize resources more quickly than normal. Carlos had been reviewing the technical specifications while the administrative discussions proceeded, his expression reflecting growing excitement about the research possibilities their collaboration might enable. Dr. Peterson, I think there's another dimension to this project that we should consider. If we're successful in solving the Serafina's integration problems, the methodology could be applicable to other complex marine systems that are becoming increasingly common as yachts incorporate more sophisticated technology. That's exactly the kind of broader research significance that would justify university investment in this project, Dr. Peterson agreed. Marine systems integration is becoming a critical challenge for the entire industry, but most research focuses on individual components rather than complete system interactions under operational conditions. Marcus felt pieces falling into place with the kind of precision that suggested their unconventional approach might actually work. Academic research provided analytical capabilities they couldn't access commercially, while their practical marine engineering experience offered real-world perspectives that purely theoretical research often lacked. What would be the next steps for organizing this partnership? Marcus asked, his engineering mind already focusing on the practical timeline they'd need to follow to meet Catherine Blackwell's 30-day deadline. Formal research agreement, graduate student assignment, and immediate access to the yacht for comprehensive diagnostic work, Dr. Peterson replied. If we move quickly, we could have a full research team working on this problem within a week. Tommy was calculating timelines, his mechanical aptitude, helping him understand the coordination challenges of implementing solutions even after they'd been identified through research. That would give us about 2 weeks to implement whatever solutions the research identifies. Tight, but potentially feasible if everything goes according to plan. Elena laughed at Tommy's optimism, her restaurant management experience providing realistic perspective on complex project timelines. In my experience, nothing ever goes completely according to plan. You boys better build in some buffer time for unexpected complications. Dr. Peterson nodded agreement, her years of managing research projects having taught her the same lesson about the gap between theoretical schedules and practical implementation realities. Elena's right, but if we organize this properly, we should have enough analytical capability and technical resources to handle most complications that might arise. As the meeting concluded with commitments to finalize partnership agreements within 24 hours, Marcus felt the most genuine optimism he'd experienced since accepting Catherine Blackwell's challenge. Their small-town marine repair shop was about to become the center of a legitimate research investigation that might actually solve one of the most complex systems integration problems in modern yacht engineering. "Do you really think this is going to work?" Sophie asked as they prepared to leave the university. Marcus looked around at the research facilities that would soon be focused on their impossible problem. then at the faces of people who'd committed their expertise and resources to proving that unconventional approaches could succeed where traditional methods had failed. "I think we're about to find out what's possible when you refuse to accept that something can't be done," Marcus replied. "And I think Catherine Blackwell is going to be very surprised by what small-town ingenuity can accomplish with the right kind of support." The formal research partnership was finalized the following morning, with Dr. Peterson expediting university procedures in ways that demonstrated both her commitment to the project and her recognition of its potential significance for marine engineering research. Marcus found himself signing agreements that transformed Rivera Marine Services from a modest boat repair shop into the commercial partner in a cutting-edge academic investigation. "This is really happening," Tommy said, reviewing the partnership documents that officially committed university resources to solving the Serafina's problems. "We're actually going to have graduate students and professors working with us to figure this out." Sophie was already preparing for the expanded diagnostic work that would begin immediately, her organizational skills proving essential as their small operation prepared to coordinate with one of the East Coast's premier marine engineering research programs. "Mr. Rivera, Dr. Peterson says 2 graduate students will be arriving this afternoon to begin comprehensive system analysis. Are we ready for that kind of intensive technical work?" Marcus looked around the workshop that had been their base of operations, recognizing that they were about to transform it into something resembling a high-tech research facility. "We're about to find out. But if we're going to solve this problem, we need to be ready for whatever level of technical sophistication the solution requires." Elena arrived with coffee and breakfast for everyone, her practical support having become essential to maintaining their energy and focus during the intensive research effort. Carlos called this morning to say that Dr. Peterson is very excited about this project. Apparently, word is spreading through the marine engineering community that someone might actually solve the Serafina mystery. "No pressure there," Tommy muttered, though his expression showed excitement rather than anxiety about the increased attention their efforts were receiving. Marcus felt the familiar combination of anticipation and responsibility that accompanied any transition from theoretical analysis to practical implementation. In less than 3 weeks, they would either prove that their unconventional approach could succeed, where traditional marine engineering had failed, or they would demonstrate the limits of small-town ambition when confronted with genuinely sophisticated technical challenges. But as he prepared to welcome university researchers into his workshop and begin the most intensive engineering investigation of his career, Marcus Rivera felt ready for whatever discoveries and challenges the next phase of their impossible project might reveal. The graduate students arrived at Rivera Marine Services carrying equipment that would have impressed NASA engineers. Dr. Jennifer Walsh and Michael Chen transformed the modest workshop into a high-tech diagnostic center, their advanced oscilloscopes and network analyzers creating a technological landscape that dwarfed anything previous consulting teams had brought to the Serafina challenge. "Your preliminary analysis was spot on," Jennifer announced after connecting her monitoring equipment to simulate the yacht's operational environment. "We're seeing exactly the electromagnetic interference patterns you predicted, causing network communication failures that cascade through the entire propulsion system." Michael's laptop displayed real-time data showing how interference from the hybrid engines disrupted the delicate timing protocols that coordinated navigation in propulsion systems. "The beauty of this problem is that once you understand the root cause, the solution becomes relatively straightforward. We need to relocate the network cables and update the software synchronization protocols." Tommy proved remarkably adept at operating university-level diagnostic equipment, his practical marine repair experience translating perfectly to sophisticated system analysis. "Boss, this is incredible. We can actually see the exact moment when electromagnetic pulses cause the communication errors that trigger everything else." Sophie documented every aspect of their breakthrough, with the thoroughness of someone who understood they were witnessing marine engineering history. "So 40 other engineers failed because they were looking for mechanical problems instead of electromagnetic interference?" "Exactly," Marcus replied, feeling vindication mixed with anticipation as their months of theoretical work crystallized into actionable solutions. Traditional marine engineering treats electrical and mechanical systems separately, but modern yachts require understanding how everything interacts simultaneously. The physical modifications began immediately, with the research team working in coordinated shifts to relocate network cables while implementing software updates that would eliminate the timing conflicts causing cascade failures. Tommy's expertise with marine electrical systems proved invaluable for the delicate cable routing work, while Michael handled the programming modifications with precision that reflected years of advanced computer science training. Elena arrived with sustenance for the exhausted team, her practical support having become essential during the intensive implementation phase. "You folks look like you're finally putting all that analysis to work, solving the actual problem." "We're about to find out if our theories work in practice," Marcus replied, watching Jennifer coordinate the testing protocols that would verify their solutions under simulated operational conditions. "Everything looks perfect on paper, but the real test comes when we activate these systems under full load." The moment of truth arrived as Michael initiated the comprehensive testing sequence, gradually increasing system loads while monitoring every parameter for signs of the communication errors that had plagued the Serafina for months. Marcus held his breath as the diagnostic displays showed stable network timing, synchronized propulsion controls, and perfectly coordinated navigation systems operating together for the first time since the yacht's construction. "Communication timing stable across all operational parameters," Michael announced with barely contained excitement. "No packet loss, no synchronization errors, complete system integration functioning as designed." Jennifer was already contacting Dr. Peterson with preliminary results while documenting their success for the academic publication that would establish new standards for marine systems integration research. This represents a fundamental breakthrough in understanding complex yacht engineering challenges. The sea trials commenced at dawn with Marcus commanding the Serafina, while university monitoring equipment tracked every system parameter in real time. As they departed Portland Harbor, decades of marine engineering experience told him immediately that something fundamental had changed. The yacht responded to controls with smooth precision instead of the subtle hesitations that had preceded previous catastrophic failures. "All systems performing nominally at half power," Michael reported from the diagnostic station, his monitoring equipment showing none of the electromagnetic interference patterns that had triggered past problems. "Network communication protocols are functioning exactly as our analysis predicted." Marcus gradually increased power while the research team verified that their modifications were eliminating the root causes of 6 months of propulsion system failures. The Serafina accelerated smoothly through each power setting, her hybrid systems delivering the performance they'd been designed to provide before installation problems created the integration conflicts that had baffled 40 consulting engineers. "Full operational capability confirmed," Jennifer announced, as they completed comprehensive testing under various load conditions. "All integrated systems maintaining perfect coordination without any signs of communication, timing errors, or electromagnetic interference problems." Catherine Blackwell was waiting at the dock when they returned, her expression unreadable as she watched the Serafina maneuver flawlessly into its berth. The wealthy tech mogul who'd issued an impossible challenge had apparently come to witness either vindication or failure of the small-town mechanic who'd claimed capabilities that teams of specialists couldn't demonstrate. "Remarkable achievement," Catherine admitted as Marcus disembarked, her tone lacking the condescension that had characterized their initial encounter. "I confess, I didn't anticipate that unconventional approaches could succeed where traditional marine engineering consulting failed so comprehensively." Marcus felt no satisfaction in her obvious surprise, recognizing that their success had required collaboration and resources that transcended any individual achievement. The solution required the right analytical tools applied by people willing to think beyond conventional diagnostic limitations. One of Catherine's technical advisors stepped forward with genuine professional interest. "Mr. Rivera, my firm handles similar integration challenges for other clients. Your diagnostic methodology could revolutionize how the marine industry approaches sophisticated systems problems." The formal verification took place before assembled marine engineering professionals who'd gathered to witness the resolution of one of the industry's most notorious technical challenges. Catherine presented Marcus with a check for $200,000, while publicly acknowledging her complete misjudgment of small-town capabilities and practical expertise enhanced by appropriate analytical resources. "I owe Mr. Rivera and his collaborators both an apology and recognition that I was fundamentally wrong about their technical capabilities," Catherine announced to the marine engineering community that had been following their unconventional investigation. "They accomplished in weeks what 40 qualified consultants couldn't manage in months, demonstrating that innovative problem-solving approaches can succeed where traditional methods fail." Dr. Peterson arrived from the university as news of their success spread through academic and commercial marine engineering circles. "This collaboration represents exactly the kind of practical research application that justifies university investment in marine systems integration studies." Elena had organized a celebration that brought together the Harbor Springs community with university researchers and marine engineering professionals, creating the kind of cross-cultural gathering that reflected the collaborative approach that had made their success possible. I knew these boys could figure out anything when they stopped trying to do everything the conventional way. As industry representatives examined the Serafina's modifications and discussed implications for broader marine engineering challenges, Marcus realized their achievement had created opportunities extending far beyond solving one wealthy woman's yacht problems. Professional interest in their diagnostic methodology suggested possibilities for expanding their operation into specialized consulting that could serve the growing market for sophisticated marine systems integration. 6 months later, Rivera Marine Engineering occupied a state-of-the-art facility that had become one of the East Coast's premier destinations for complex yacht systems challenges. The original Harbor Springs workshop remained operational as a community service center, while the main facility handled projects that attracted international attention from yacht owners and engineering firms seeking solutions to seemingly impossible technical problems. Tommy had completed his marine engineering degree through the university partnership, his practical knowledge enhanced by formal education that prepared him for increasingly sophisticated challenges. Sophie was finishing high school while working part-time at the engineering facility. Her college applications focused on marine engineering programs that would build upon the foundation she'd developed through their collaboration. Incredible how everything started with an impossible bet and a wealthy woman who assumed money could solve any technical problem. Sophie reflected as they reviewed applications for research partnerships with offshore renewable energy companies. Now we're receiving inquiries from engineering firms worldwide. Marcus surveyed the facility that bore his name, but reflected contributions from everyone who'd helped transform an impossible challenge into a thriving business expansion. The Serafina project had proven that innovative approaches could succeed where conventional methods failed, while demonstrating the importance of community support and collaborative expertise in achieving extraordinary results. Catherine Blackwell had become one of their most enthusiastic clients, commissioning a new yacht with integrated systems designed from inception to avoid the problems that had plagued her previous vessel. Her transformation from antagonist to advocate reflected genuine recognition of their capabilities rather than simple admission of error. Sometimes the most significant breakthroughs come from refusing to accept that problems are unsolvable, Marcus observed, watching university graduate students collaborate with experienced marine technicians on projects that pushed current engineering boundaries. The Serafina taught us that there is no such thing as an impossible challenge, only challenges requiring the right combination of knowledge, creativity, and determination. Elena maintained her role as the practical wisdom provider, her restaurant having become the unofficial celebration headquarters for marine engineering successes that had transformed Harbor Springs from a forgotten fishing village into a destination for sophisticated technical work. Success happens when smart people work together instead of trying to prove who's smartest. As Marcus prepared to leave the facility that evening, he reflected on how their achievement had transcended marine engineering to demonstrate broader principles about collaboration, innovation, and the extraordinary results possible when people refuse to accept artificial limitations. The impossible had become routine, and the routine had become extraordinary. Driving through the Maine coastal landscape that had shaped his understanding of practical problem-solving and determined persistence, Marcus Rivera felt the deep satisfaction that came from rediscovering forgotten capabilities and proving that expertise enhanced by collaboration could overcome any advantage that money or conventional wisdom might provide. Their success had shown that the most remarkable achievements often emerged from the most unlikely combinations of people, resources, and circumstances. Sometimes that recognition was all the vindication anyone needed to keep pushing beyond established boundaries toward genuinely extraordinary accomplishments. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.